Hello, my name is Sydney Chiarito, and today I'm going to present the effect of transformational teaching on student and instructor perception. So the purpose of my study is to determine if transformational teaching had an impact on student and self-perception. As an educator, I wanted to know if the perception of one's abilities had an impact on student perception of them. And so I wanted to look at how students thought of their teacher compared to how a teacher thought of themselves. Some of the main questions that I focused on for my hypotheses were, what are the effects of transformational teaching on student perception of the instructor? And what are the effects of transformational teaching on self-perception of the instructor? So how does the student perception change and how does self-perception change based on a day-to-day lesson? Before I started my research, I conducted some background information, and I found that there was no real solid background research on the effect of perception on transformational methods or vice versa. So I had to go with what was closest, and I started by looking at the comfortability of teachers using transformational methods, what was considered to be successful in an instructor perspective, and then what was successful in an institute perspective. So to start, Cunningham and Rappa did a study back in 2016, and what they found was that most of the teachers were uncomfortable with the transformational teaching methods because most teachers that were using the methods were veteran teachers who had not grown up using the methods or being taught them. But they found that all the students who had the teachers while using those methods did have a wide range of academic success. So in a recap, they found that students had higher test grades and higher grades in the classes overall, even though the teachers weren't comfortable using the methods. So to continue, back in 2013, Lai focused on a research study where the whole group instructional time on academic success and instructor perspective was looked at. So Lai looked at whether a whole group for instructional time where you taught the methods that the student needed to use to solve a addition or subtraction problem in the mathematics setting was impacted by the length of time that they were given. So she split whole group into 30-minute segments and 60-minute segments. There was no difference on the 30-minute segments versus 60-minute segments, but they did find students did respond to instructional teaching methods. However, Portavood, Carnegie, Fiza, and King did a study back in 2005 that focused on students' responses and what they were interested in when schools use transformational teaching methods. And they found that students did have a higher response, whether that be socially or academically, on a more positive scale, to transformational teaching methods, which were more of the creating a welcoming environment classroom, making it colorful, having students have a fair say in what was going on, making sure their voice was heard, and equality amongst the students and treatment, rather than actual teaching methods that were used for, say, presenting an addition problem. There was some other research I did look at, but I found after running my experiment that it wasn't really conclusive or imperative to what I was studying at the time. So the research study I conducted was a questionnaire study, so strictly quantitative rather than qualitative. I did want to look at the qualitative aspect, but unfortunately it was deemed too much of a distraction by the principal. And unfortunately, the principal's word is law when it comes to doing research on students. So I looked at a 16-student second grade classroom at Louis Anna Woodbury Elementary School, also known as Law Elementary. This is over in Fort Meade in Polk County, Florida, and it is in a impoverished county, so all the students are on free reduced lunch and most supplies are provided for them. Their math block was a 1 hour whole group followed by a 30-minute center rotation 5 days a week. So they had the 1 hour whole group and 30-minute center time every day. For the purpose of this study, I observed the 1 hour whole group math block and used that as the time frame to do the questionnaires and surveys for the children. So after that 1 hour whole group time block, I provided the Likert scale questionnaire, which I will get into further detail. But it was a post-instructional survey, so right after the time of the instruction, so it was fresh in their minds. As for the instructor, it was one teacher in that same second grade class, and it was also a post-instructional survey, which is quantitative on a Likert scale to determine how well they perceived their teaching abilities for that lesson for that day. So the students' Likert scale questionnaire, it was a 10-question Likert scale ranging from 1 to 5, with a sad face to a really happy face. 1 being strongly disagree or crying face, I do not feel the teacher understood what was going on, to 5, strongly agree, happy, smiling, bright, I agree completely, the teacher made me feel as if that was going on in the classroom. What I noticed from the data collection across the 16 students was looking at the overall test questions, the students kept more of a mean of around 4.5 points. So they tended to agree that yes, this teacher was providing them with multiple methods of instruction. Yes, the teacher was answering their questions. Yes, the teacher made the environment welcoming for them. But there was very little movement. So it seemed that no matter what day and what was going on, they agreed more that the teacher knew what was going on. However, I found that it didn't correspond with the movements of the teacher's scores for her Likert scale. So as we can see here, the students ranging from test 1 to test 6, they did have a slight drop where the average for the total test score dropped slightly below 45 on test 2, but then began to increase again from test 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. But overall, you can see that it maintains a near constant average and did not move within significant range. If we look at the teacher's Likert scale response, we can see that there's a little bit more movement. The teacher was provided a 17-question Likert scale survey with a 1 to 5, strongly agree being 5, strongly disagree being 1. I did find that there was more movement on her questions, where her average ranged from, instead of being a 0.5 difference span plus or minus for the students, hers tended to be closer to a 1.0 plus or minus from test 1 to 2 to 3 and so on. And therefore, her overall scores for her tests did have more movement, but since the range was less than 5 points, it was found to not be significant in the movement. And again, looking at her test scores, there was no corresponding movement with the students' scores. Here we can see her overall test totals. Her first one, she started at a 74 and she increased to 79. But then looking at her evaluation for number 3, she decreased down to 67 with another increase up to 78. And then a decrease down to 73 and a maintaining staying at 73. So there's definitely more movement here that we can see and we notice compared to the students. So the student perception really didn't change from the first evaluation to the second to the last evaluation over time, but the self-evaluation for the teacher did have more change. As we can see, our highest point was 79 points and our lowest point was 67. However, there is multiple outliers that I cannot account for based on mood, since the instructor in question was pregnant at the time. But we can see, for the most part, there was a consistent score. And again, her scores didn't change in a significant manner. So what does that mean as a conclusion? Well, concluding, we can see that there's no significant impact on the student perception and how their teachers do. And we can see that there's no significant impact on teacher perception for how they did and the students and what they think the teacher did. A teacher can be having a horrible day and still give their best, even if it may not be 100%. And the students really can't notice the difference because they see that the teacher is trying. And when asked based on the teacher's ability of, are they trying to make you feel welcomed? Are they trying to make you feel important? Are they letting you ask questions and giving you the opportunity to learn in more than one format? The students find that the teacher is consistent no matter what is going on in the teacher's life. One thing I would like to know is, how would the results differ with different groups? The students I looked at were a high-performing academically class with very few low-performing students. There was only 2 low-performing students, but they did agree with the majority of the class, and the averages stayed the same compared to student A to student B and so on through the 16, that they felt the teacher was using transformational teaching methods and providing a welcoming environment and allowing opportunities for questions and answers. So my question would be, how would the results differ in a completely low performing group or a mid-level group? So my continued action plan would be, I would love to consider further research on this subject. Since there's very little literature currently on the topic, I feel it's very needed, and it would be exponentially considerate and imperative to the fields to understand how perception works. I know some literature has looked at teacher perception on the understanding of transformational teaching methods, but it hasn't looked at the teaching perspective of how well it's being administered. So I would like to continue this research with lower academically performing students, first continuing in 2nd grade and then branching out to all grades while looking at all levels of performance for academics. I would also like to pull in an administration perception of the instructor. Normally, administration is required to perform regular, whether it be formal, informal, or walkthroughs of the classroom to determine if the teacher is on task or if they're providing the students with proper instruction, if they have proper anchor charts. So I would like to see the administration perception of if their instructor is providing a transformational teaching environment for an outsider's point of view. I would also like to look at the administration perception of how well the transformational teaching methods are being introduced in the classroom. A lot of teachers nowadays are either very new and have been studying transformational teaching methods, but are unsure of how to properly or appropriately implement them in their classroom, or by veteran teachers for 20+ years who have learned to teach one way and are starting to introduce transformational teaching methods. So I'd like to see the administration perception on those methods being used and if they're being successful versus needing work, or looking at the veteran use compared to the newcomers use. My last further research I would love to look at is the student performance scores while also looking at the perception of the teacher. A lot of students create a bond with their teacher because school is supposed to be a safe environment. And with the environment the teacher provides is transformational teaching methods for welcoming and inviting and warm and caring and safe with no judgment. This could also create a false sense of the teacher being perfect and doing absolutely well in a high performance perspective. but when it comes to the performance of how they do academically, it may tell a different story. So unfortunately, I did not have the ability to look at that in this research, but that would be something to consider greatly, as I feel having that performance aspect shown would be complete and show if there was true significance or not on the perspective of the teacher. Lastly, with my action plan, I would like to implement these findings into PLC and PD opportunities. I know there's a lot of teachers that go into planning or professional development classes and they find that they're not sure why they're there. They feel that they know everything already, or they're just having a frustrating day. But it would be helpful to teachers to know that even though you may be having a rough day, as long as you try, the student's perspective of you will never change. It will remain constant. So here are some of the sources I've used, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.